promised you'd quit.
Well, I have the opportunity to do some leadership coaching in my life, and anytime I'm doing any leadership coaching, one of the questions that I always ask is, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your energy level like? And oftentimes there is this thing where it's like, well, I could use a nap, so like I'm one number, and then like spiritually I'm another number, and then relationally I'm another number, and then emotionally I'm another number. And I always say, if you took a snapshot of your life, 1 being completely exhausted, and 10 being totally energized, ready to run a marathon, even though I would never suggest running a marathon under any conditions. I don't care how much energy you have, don't do it. Not worth it. I've watched videos of it. It just looks bad all the way around. But I would ask you, as we jump into this next version of the You Promise message series, to think for yourself in the quietness of your own mind and heart, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being exhausted, 10 being completely energized, holistically in your life, what is your energy level at today? You see, I think for most of us, myself included, we would be leaning closer to the exhausted side of the line than the energized side of the line, if we're really, really honest. You see, we live in this world of busyness, you know? There's this thing that happens when we introduce ourselves to each other. How are you? Oh, I'm busy. Anybody done that? I literally tried to stop saying I'm busy, and I keep saying, it just falls out of my mouth. And then you've got other kinds of people. How are you today? Oh, I'm busy. Whew, busy. And then you got the people that are like ones, okay? And they like to add Z's after Z after Z in this word busy. Like, we are busy, man. It just continues to go on. It's like 2-fold, 3-fold, 6-fold. The number of busies is so indicative of where we are at in the spectrum of our energy. Our world, it doesn't seem to be pushing us further and further into energized and rejuvenated and restored. It seems to be pushing us at a clipping rate towards exhaustion. If we're really, really honest, I would bet that most of us are closer to a 1 than a 10. Well, we are in a message series called You Promise, where we are looking at the promises of God, a handful of the big, wide, broad-stroking promises of God. And we've looked at the fact that there is a promise that God hears us when we cry out to Him. That God finishes what He starts. When He started a good work in you and me, that He promises to finish that. And then last week we talked about the promise of peace. That there is a peace that surpasses understanding that God has promised to you and I. And if you missed any of those, I would encourage you to go to our website or go to our YouTube channel and check those out, because there are promises that are important for us to understand. And this series has been so powerful, because as we look at the promises of God, we know that His promises look different than the world's, because we live in a world where everyone breaks their promises, but our God keeps His. That's the world that we live in. Everyone breaks their promises, including you and me, but our God keeps His. He is faithful, 100%. Every promise that He gives to us, He is willing to and will fulfill for you and I. He's faithful to do that. The fact that God is batting 1,000 when it comes to His promises, it means that we don't just want to hear it and understand it with our minds, but we have to allow ourselves to experience it, to take hold of it, and to allow it to impact our everyday lives. And so my hope and my prayer is that throughout this series, that we wouldn't just hear these words and know these promises, but that we would understand them deeply and fully, and that would allow us to move forward in our life having experienced the promises of God. Well, the promise I want us to look at today is the promise of rest. That we worship a God who has promised to give you and I rest. And I'm just going to say, no matter what the number was, anybody interested in a nap today? Just me. All right, sounds good. It's okay. It's all right, God, just forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It's all right. Sundays are made for naps. Amen. Sundays are made to take a rest, to have a moment to just take it in. I wish that it would rain every Sunday afternoon because there's nothing like a nap when it's raining outside. But this rest that we're going to look at, it's more than just physical tiredness. It's more than just taking a nap. You see, the rest that God promises to us is a real rest, a long-lasting rest, a rest that brings rejuvenation and restoration to our lives. And I just know that we live in a world that is so desperate for rest. We need rest today more than ever before. You see, despite our world being most safe, most conducive to an easy life, the youth that are growing up in this world, in this day and age where we are living in the safest environment that humanity has ever seen, even though it's the safest, we are still experiencing the highest level of anxiety that humanity has ever seen. We need rest more than ever. You see, it seems like there's something happening in our world. You see, this modern world just seems to no longer be conducive to human flourishing. Let that sink in for a moment. The pace and the life that we have created around us, the anxiety that we are living in, it just seems like the world that we're living in, this modern life, it's just simply not conducive for human flourishing. You see, our rapid pace, it just doesn't seem to be restoring our souls, does it? No, in fact, it actually seems to be doing the opposite. It seems to be sucking the life out of us instead of restoring our souls. And so when we come before God, when we come before Jesus, and we know the words that said, I will lead you beside quiet waters, I will restore your soul, then it just seems like, why isn't my soul feeling restored? And we look to this world, we look to this pace, and we just understand that the pace that we're running at is just simply not conducive to human flourishing. Like, you don't need statistics. Like, you didn't need me to tell you that. I could put up statistic after statistic after statistic on the screen, but you don't need to see the numbers because you live it. We see it, we feel it, we know it in our lives. We don't need the statistics because our life is showing it to us. And I think that when it comes to rest, our life is just simply outside of the rhythm of rest. This promise that God has given to us, it has a rhythmic nature to it. It has a cyclical nature to it. The rhythm of rest is the promise that God has given to us. It's important that we take hold of the rhythm of rest that God has laid out before us. Are there anybody who loves the Olympics? Anybody love the Olympics? Just pumped for the Paris Summer Olympics coming? I seem to love the Winter Olympics a little more than I love the Summer Olympics, but whenever it's on, I can't stop watching it. It's just like, this is amazing, and I think they should really get away from letting the athletes do it. Let's just be serious. I think it should be like a lottery. Like, Austin, you've been selected for the 100-meter hurdles. You better start training. You're on for 2028. Like, can you imagine if it was just like a lottery and just like average normal people are just like 100-meter freestyle, you know, swimming in the pool? Can you imagine what that would look like? Now that's entertainment. That is Olympics that I could get on board with. In the Winter Olympics, one of the events that I love watching is I love watching downhill skiing. I love the alpine where they're carving, but I really love the moguls because I think it's absolutely crazy. Specifically the ones where they're like bouncing down there, boom, 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 boom. And then there's a huge jump at the end. It's like, they spin and land on the ground. It's like, how do you learn how to do that? Like, how many times did you land on your head before you were able to actually get that to work? But I love the moguls. I love the aerial flips and spins and all that. I just think it's absolutely amazing. What's also fun, this might tell you a little bit about my personality, I also really enjoy it when the moguls, they're going and they get out of rhythm and then yard sail. It's like ski poles and boots are going this way and skis are going this way, and I like that as well. The reason I tell you that when it comes to moguls, it's all about rhythm. You see, they have understood the rhythm that their body has to be in to see the next mogul coming, to find the next divot, to find the next cut, to see the next hill, to continue to go down, to have their eyes down the hill prepared for what is coming. Moguls are all about rhythm. And friends, I just want to say it today. I think that when it comes to rest, so many more of us are having a yard sale in our life than actually finding the rhythm of rest. We are running at a breakneck speed, at an unsustainable clip, because speed is often the problem. You can't find the rhythm if your speed is off. We have to find the rhythm of rest, or our lives will continue on a course of disaster. Did you know that the greatest enemy of depth and rest is speed? It's actually impossible to love at a high rate of speed. You ever heard somebody say God's speed? You know what that means? Do you know what God's speed is? 3 miles an hour because he walked everywhere? I don't think that's by coincidence. It's important to understand when people say God's speed, that there is a speed to the rhythm of God. There is a speed to the rhythm of rest. And so many of us are just driving our cars 100 miles an hour, driving our lives 100 miles an hour, a white hot at a breakneck speed, and we wonder why we are exhausted. Friends, what's the rhythm of rest in your life? Jesus understands this. What I love about our God is that he wrote these words. He said these things thousands of years ago, knowing that this day, that this moment for you and I, we would need to hear about the rhythm of rest more than any other generation before us. See, Jesus, he said it this way in Matthew chapter 11. I'm going to read from the Message version because I believe that this version, it shows us the rhythm of rest. It feels like a rhythm of rest. It says this in verse 28, are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Doesn't that just sound amazing? I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. You'll find a real rest, and you'll learn to live lightly, freely. Because friends, we're tired and we're worn out. But Jesus has promised that he will give you and I a real rest. I'm so hungry for a real rest. Anybody else? I'm just so looking for a real rest, not this counterfeit version that the world gives us. Not just this snippet. I'm so sick of walking through the grind of life, just working for the weekend. Just grinding through my week, just trying to get myself to Friday. Just trying to get myself to Saturday. I gotta just work, and just like holding out for the weekend. Or anybody else just holding out for that next vacation? Anybody ever said, man, that next season, once this season's over, the next season will be better? Anybody? Just me again? Got it. I feel like my entire life is just like, well, the next season will be better. Once the kids are in middle school, once the kids are out of the house, once we get this project done, or this car done, or this project done, or this thing done, or that thing done, once I'm done with this season, then the next one I'll be able to find the rhythm of rest. And it's an act in futility. It never comes. You see, this rhythm of rest, if we don't stop and take hold of this promise, it's always just out of reach. We just continue to strive and hope and reach for a life that's filled with rest, a life that is restored with God's rest. No matter what's going on, Jesus promises to give you and I real rest. Even when you think you should be able to handle it all, but you can't. What does Jesus say? Come to me. Maybe it's not just that you're physically sinking, but actually you feel like your soul has been shrinking over the past days, weeks, and months. What does Jesus say to you? Come to me, and I'll give you real rest. Come to me when you can't do it anymore. Come to me when you've prayed and prayed and prayed and believed for a miracle, and you just don't know if you can pray another prayer in faith. Come to me, and I'll give you real rest. Jesus says, come to me when you've prayed the prayers and hoped and prayed and pleaded with God for that child that's struggling, for that marriage that's struggling, for that relationship that's struggling. Come to me and I'll give you rest. Come to me when you work 2 jobs and ends still aren't meeting. Come to me and I'll give you real rest. Come to me when you're broken and hurting and discouraged and in desperate need of rest, not just physically, but holistically, just in desperate need of rest. What does Jesus say to us? Come to me. All of you, come to me and I will give you rest. It's powerful because God says, are you tired? Are you worn out? All of you come to me and I will give you real rest. What I want you to know today is that not is just reserved for a select few. When Jesus said all, he meant all. And that includes you. No matter how crazy life is, no matter how broken life is, Jesus has said, all of you come to me and I will give you real rest. That's a promise that you can hold on to. It's not for the person sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you. That is a promise that is for you and I, for all of us to take hold of today. And no matter how broken your life feels, no matter how desperate you feel, don't believe the lie that rest isn't for you. The first thing I want you to know today is that real rest is for you too. Real rest is for you too. It's not just for a select few. It's not just for your mom or your sister or your neighbor or your aunt or your uncle. It is for you too. In the midst of all of the craziness, in the midst of your exhaustion, real rest is promised to you as well. But the challenge comes in where we look to find our rest. And I think so many of us are just simply looking to the weekend for some rest. We're looking to another vacation for some rest. And yet the problem with this is that no matter how many weekends you live, no matter how many vacations you take, Monday morning always comes and the grind sucks more of your life out of you than any weekend could ever restore in you. I just want to say that Jesus gives each and every one of you the promise of rest without a bunch of caveats. Notice inside of the scripture, are you tired? Are you worn out? Well, if you ... then come to me and I'll give you rest. There are no qualifiers. There are no caveats. There are no things you have to do. You don't have to get your life in order before you come to him. He just simply says, if you're tired and you're worn out, come to me and I will give you real rest, full stop. Just come to me. Also notice that he doesn't say, come to me and I'll give you real rest as long as you've produced enough for me. As long as you're efficient enough, as long as you're doing enough, then you can come to me and I'll give you real rest. Friends, the promise of real rest that Jesus has given to you and I today, it doesn't come with qualifiers. It doesn't come because you're the perfect mom. It doesn't come because you're the perfect dad. It doesn't come because you're so wealthy, because you're so successful or unsuccessful. It doesn't come with any qualifiers. It doesn't come because you provide for your family well. The promise of rest, it comes from experiencing the rest and the rhythms of God that he has laid out for you. It's found in regular rhythms of rest. It comes from being inside and living inside of the rhythms of rest that God has laid out for us. Because Jesus didn't say that rest is found on the weekends. He didn't say it's found in the next vacation. Guys, real rest is found in the rhythm of regular recovery. What does that mean? It means that it has to be found inside of the life that we live. When I look at the life of Jesus, nowhere do I find, and then Jesus, for the weekend, just went away. And then Jesus took a week's paid vacation, and he went down to Greece for the weekend. He took off and went away for the weekend, or he took a month off. No, Jesus found this rhythm of rest inside of his daily life. And this might be a hot take because oftentimes I think inside of the church, we just say, you need to step out of your everyday life. You need to step out of what you're doing to find real rest. But the thing is when I looked at the man of Jesus, what I see, Jesus was always busy, but he was never in a hurry. Jesus found opportunities to rest in the midst of the purpose and calling that was had on his life. Jesus was on his way to places when he stopped at Jacob's well and talked to a Samaritan woman and offered her living water where she would never be thirsty again. Jesus was already busy, already had a full schedule, but he was never in a hurry. He was never exhausted. Why? Because regularly it says, and then Jesus went away for a while as he was accustomed to and spent time with his Father in heaven. Jesus found a rhythm and lived a rhythm of prayer and time with God. And that is the promise of real rest that God gives to you and I as well. You see, real rest is found wherever we refocus on the grace and the goodness and the glory of God. That's what Jesus did. In the midst of the chaos, in the midst of everyone wanting him to heal their sick, to perform miracles, to teach on this subject and that subject, Jesus continually comes back in the daily and weekly and monthly rhythms of his life, and he refocuses himself on the goodness and the glory and the grace of God, and he's asking you and I to do the same. Jesus experienced the rhythm of real rest by regularly spending time focusing his mind's attention and heart's affection on the grace and goodness and glory of God. That's where real rest is found. I wish I could go around this room and I could say to each and every one of you by name, I know that this is how you find real rest, and this is the space where you find rest, and this is the environment. And if you were going to create a daily and a weekly and a monthly and a yearly rhythm of rest, this is what it would look like for you. But that's something that you have to figure out. For me, the daily rhythm of rest, it oftentimes looks like me going for a walk with my wife. Late in the evening when the sun is setting in the spring, summer, and fall, for her and I just to walk hand in hand and to talk about our day, to talk about our week, to dream about the future, to just spend time in quiet. What is it for you where you can find a rhythm of rest? Some of you may be creative. Maybe you've gotten to this point of exhaustion where you haven't been able to paint in months or draw in months, and you have a creative expression that you know and love, and when you do that, you just find rest for your soul. Maybe you need to find a daily rhythm of painting. I don't know what it looks like for each and every one of you, but find a rhythm of rest. You guys might think I'm kind of a psycho after I tell you this, but about 5 years ago, I was at a total burnout phase. And I was totally done, and I couldn't figure out why I was so tired, and I was in desperate need of rest. And just the noises and all of the to-do lists in my mind just continued to cycle and circle around. And so I decided that I was not going to listen to anything in the car. And so I drive down the road like a psychopath in complete silence. I decided I wasn't going to listen to any music. I wasn't going to listen to any podcasts. I wasn't going to call people on my drive. I wasn't going to be efficient. I wasn't going to be productive in my drives to work and home from work or dropping my kids off at school. That became a part of my daily rhythm of rest. For you, it might just be a cup of coffee with a friend on a regular basis, with somebody that you love. Maybe for you, it's spending time in God's word, spending time in prayer, spending time in nature. Maybe for you, it's gardening, that you just feel rested after you put your hands in the dirt. And watching something grow just brings you an incredible amount of rest. Whatever it looks like for you, I'd invite you to find a rhythm of rest for you. My monthly cadence for rest, I block off 4 hours on the fourth Thursday of every month to go, and I just grab a journal, grab a notebook and a pen, and I just go off into nature and just find a quiet spot to be able to experience some rest and some quiet and some solitude. And I have to admit to you, the last time that I took my calendar up on that was October. The last time I took 4 hours away to just go and to rest was in October. And as I look back over the last 3 or 4 weeks, as I have been driving to work and driving my kids to school, do you know what I've noticed? I've been taking phone calls. And I've been listening to podcasts. And my rhythm of rest has changed. And I'll just tell you that I can feel it inside of who I am. That my mental space and my sleep and my rest, the rhythm of my rest is off. And so I tell you all of that to say, I think it's easy to come in here and think like, oh yeah, Austin's up here telling us about the promise of rest. He must have arrived. I don't know if you see any badges of rest on Austin, but they don't exist. Because this promise and this truth is as true for me as it is for you. And in these moments and in these seasons, when our rhythm gets off, the only thing that we can do is to refocus our mind's attention and heart's affection on the goodness and the grace and the glory and the love and the peace of God. It's the only place that rest happens. And friends, if you are tired and worn out, I want to encourage you to find some space to experience some rhythms of rest. If you're tired of the grind, if you're tired of the stress, Jesus says, come to me, all of you, and I will give you a real rest. Because God's rest is made perfect in our weakness. If you're tired of being defined by what you do, by what you produce, Jesus is saying, come to me and I will give you real rest. Come learn the unforced rhythms of grace. The last thing I want you to hear today is that the promise that God has given you for rest, it's a promise that you can't earn. It's a promise that we don't deserve. It's just simply a promise that we have to receive. And the only way to receive it is if we refocus our minds and our hearts on the goodness and the grace and the glory of God. And so I want to invite you to take a moment and to listen to this once more, to maybe even close your eyes and to listen to these words as Jesus spoke them to you. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me. And you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Jesus, we thank you and we praise you for that today. God, I pray that we would take hold of that truth, that we would find rest in your promises today. God, that we would learn to live inside of the unforced rhythms of grace, that we would learn to live inside of the rhythms of rest that you have laid out before us, God. That we would know that you are with us, that we would take your example. God, I just pray that all of us would just be courageous enough to set down the busyness and the pace of this world, and that we would just pick up. That we would come to you and that we would receive the light and fulfilling life that you've designed us for. God, that we would follow your example of the abundant life that is found in the unforced rhythms of rest, God. God, help us to refocus on your grace and your goodness and your glory today. And in that moment that we will find true rest, real rest for our souls. God, that we would stop just working for the weekend or working for the next vacation. But God, that we would find rest within our work. We would rest inside of our purpose and inside of our calling. Jesus, we trust you and we love you and we surrender this to you. Amen.